Louisiana is about to spend $2.3 billion replacing a single bridge.
We're building bridges to safety. We're building bridges to save lives. And today it is finally here.
The problem is that officials knew it needed replacing more than 20 years ago. Back in 2002, the same project was expected to cost about $450 million. Today, the price tag is more than 5 times higher. And all of that centers around one aging bridge in Lake Charles that carries roughly 90,000 vehicles every day. So what happened? Why did a known infrastructure problem sit unresolved for decades?
Years of delays, leaders say they're finally turning plans into progress on a brand new I-10 Calcasieu River Bridge.
And how did the cost of fixing it explode by nearly $2 billion? Let's take a closer look. In 1952, the American road belonged to the states. The interstate system didn't exist yet. Highways were local lifelines, built to connect neighboring cities and move regional goods. When Louisiana built a new bridge across the Calcasieu River to carry U.S. Highway 90, the engineering matched that modest scale exactly. It was designed to carry 37,000 vehicles a day, built with a 50-year lifespan, meant to serve the region until 2002, then be replaced. But the river beneath it created a problem. Upstream sat petrochemical plants and deepwater shipping terminals. To let massive tankers pass underneath, engineers had to raise the center of the span 135 feet into the air. And because space was tight on both banks, the only way to reach that height was a brutal 5% grade, the steepest highway climb in Louisiana. For the lighter cars of the post-war era, it was an acceptable trade-off. The bridge opened, the ironwork railings were cast with decorative crossed pistols, a nod to the pirate lore of the Calcasieu River, and locals started calling it the Pistol Bridge. It was exactly the right answer to the question Louisiana was asking in 1952. 4 years later, the question changed completely. In 1956, Congress authorized the Interstate Highway System, 41,000 miles of limited-access freeway connecting every major city in the country. In southern Louisiana, U.S. Highway 90 was folded into Interstate 10, a coast-to-coast artery running from California to Florida. Overnight, the local Pistol Bridge became a piece of national infrastructure. Federal officials recognized the problem immediately. The bridge was never built for interstate weights or cross-country freight volumes. Washington acknowledged it on the record in the 1960s and promised Louisiana a replacement would follow. That promise was never kept. The bridge was left to do an interstate's job. Lanes never widened, grade never lowered, steel never reinforced. By the time its 50-year lifespan quietly expired in 2002, it was still standing, carrying traffic it was never meant to hold. The economy didn't wait for a new bridge. It just kept growing around the old one. Southwest Louisiana's petrochemical industry expanded. The port of Lake Charles expanded with it. I-10 became the primary east-west freight artery along the Gulf Coast. And the Pistol Bridge sat at the only crossing for miles, carrying everything that moved along it. By 2009, daily crossings had hit 51,800, already 40% above the bridge's design capacity. By 2016, the number had passed 80,000. Today, it sits at 90,000. That's 2.4 times what the structure was built to handle. And the federal response wasn't replacement. It was restriction. Speed limits dropped to 50 miles per hour, 15 below the interstate standard, not for safety, but to reduce impact forces on aging steel. Heavy trucks were confined to the right lane only. The result was a permanent bottleneck, slower vehicles at the front, traffic stacking up on both approaches, an already overloaded bridge getting worked even harder. The federal government officially classified the bridge as functionally obsolete. That doesn't mean it's about to fall. It means it can no longer do the job it's being asked to do. Lanes too narrow, no shoulders, a steep grade with restricted sightlines. 7 other I-10 bridges carry the same label. But the Calcasieu crossing has something most of them don't. There is no alternative. The nearest other crossing, I-210, sits several miles south. Rerouting full I-10 freight volume through it would add 8 to 10 miles to every trip and create a new bottleneck on a road not built for that load. A functionally obsolete bridge in a city with options is an inconvenience. The Pistol Bridge is the only crossing on a major national freight corridor. That's something else entirely. Every bridge in the U.S. is tracked in a federal database called the National Bridge Inventory. Inspectors score each structure to determine whether it stays open, gets restricted, or gets shut down. The Calcasieu River Bridge entered that database in 1992 with a sufficiency rating of 40.9 out of 100. That score has been falling ever since. Today, it sits at 6.6. The federal database's own language for that score, basically intolerable, requiring high priority of corrective action. A separate structural evaluation component has dropped to 3 out of 9. A score of 2 means mandatory closure. For context, before the I-35W bridge in Minneapolis collapsed into the Mississippi River during evening rush hour in 2007, killing 13 people, its sufficiency rating was 50. The Calcasieu Bridge is rated more than 7 times lower than that today. The numbers have real physical evidence behind them. In 1981, an expansion joint failed and punched through the fuel tank of a passing 18-wheeler. The fuel ignited. 5 months later, another driver spotted a second joint showing the same failure mode. Traffic was rerouted while repairs were made. In 2020, Hurricane Laura drove a casino barge into the bridge's support structure. The bridge held, but the incident made something plain. This is an industrial waterway in a hurricane corridor with no parallel crossing, no bypass, no redundancy of any kind. In 2012, Louisiana completed a major repair program costing tens of millions of dollars. When it was finished, the state declared the bridge safe and operational. The sufficiency rating stayed at 6.6. Maintenance can't fix what's actually wrong. A bridge past its design life, carrying more than twice its rated load, doesn't recover through repair cycles. It just deteriorates more slowly. The Calcasieu Bridge is one of 1,545 structurally deficient bridges in Louisiana, part of a national pattern of post-war infrastructure held together by maintenance budgets instead of replacement programs. What separates it from the others isn't its condition. That's shared by thousands of structures across the country. What separates it is the traffic. A deficient rural bridge carrying 2,000 crossings a day is a local problem with a local solution. A bridge 1 point above mandatory closure carrying I-10 freight traffic is something the rating system wasn't designed to handle. The inspectors can measure the decline. They can't close what can't be closed without consequences larger than the risk they're trying to prevent. So every morning, the data says the same thing it's been saying since 1992. And every morning, 90,000 vehicles get on the ramp and keep moving. A bridge rated 6.6 doesn't stay open because the rating is wrong. It stays open because closing it would be worse. Interstate 10 runs 2,460 miles from Santa Monica to Jacksonville, the second longest highway in the country. For freight moving between Texas and Louisiana, between the largest petrochemical complex in the country and the ports that export its products to the world, there is one crossing at Lake Charles, one bridge, and what crosses it matters enormously. The Port of Lake Charles is the 10th busiest deepwater port in the United States. It handles 65 million tons of cargo per year, trades with more than 70 countries, and sits at the center of more than $108 billion in industrial investment. Southwest Louisiana is the world's #1 location for liquefied natural gas exports. Facilities like Cameron LNG and Venture Global ship fuel to Europe, Asia, and Latin America on fixed delivery contracts. In 2024, the economic activity tied to the Calcasieu Ship Channel alone was estimated at $83.4 billion. The supply chains feeding those facilities move overland on I-10 across the Pistol Bridge. A closure doesn't stop LNG exports immediately. It breaks the logistics chain that keeps the facilities running, adding cost and delay to an industry whose contracts don't accommodate either. Then hurricane season arrives. Southwest Louisiana has taken near-direct hits from Rita, Harvey, Laura, and Ida since 2005. Before each storm, the mandatory evacuation protocol routes residents eastbound on I-10 across the Calcasieu River Bridge. Before Laura alone, more than 580,000 coastal residents were ordered out. During Laura, DOTD closed the bridge preemptively. While it was shut, that casino barge broke free and slammed into the structure. The bridge survived. Inspections confirmed it was still standing. The closure lasted days. That was a planned shutdown under controlled conditions with advance warning. The scenario the rating system has been flagging since 1992 is an unplanned one. There are no shoulders on this bridge. That means when a vehicle breaks down, a blown tire, a crash, anything, 135 feet above the river, emergency responders cannot reach it without stopping all traffic. Every incident becomes a full closure. Every closure cascades back through the I-10 interchange and into a freight network serving the 10th busiest port in the country. A bridge doesn't have to collapse to cost money. It costs money every day, in freight delays, in evacuation constraints, in the friction of running a 21st century logistics corridor across a 1952 state highway bridge that was never meant to be here. When the cost of closing something exceeds the cost of it failing, the decision stops being about engineering. It becomes about money, and that's when the delays start. The decision to replace the Calcasieu River Bridge was made in the 1980s. Not formally, no contract signed, no money committed, but Louisiana's Department of Transportation had already documented the deterioration, watched the traffic grow past the design envelope, and acknowledged the bridge had a finite remaining service life. The case for replacement was clear. What followed was 4 decades of studies, proposals, stalled budgets, and deferred decisions. The first complication arrived in 1994. A chemical spill released an estimated 1.7 million pounds of ethylene dichloride into the Calcasieu River. EDC sinks in water and migrates through the ground with groundwater. When Louisiana DOTD began its feasibility work, soil testing found the contamination plume had spread directly into the state's right-of-way at the Sampson Street interchange, exactly where the new bridge's approach roads needed to go. Construction through contaminated ground requires remediation. The program stopped. In 1999, the Federal Highway Administration and Louisiana DOTD formally initiated a replacement proposal. By 2002, a feasibility study confirmed what the data had been saying for a decade. The bridge needed to go. It priced the job at $450 million and recommended action. Nobody acted. Over the next 15 years, the project cycled through state budgets and federal funding applications, competing for the same pool of money as every other deteriorating structure in the state. In 2017, a proposal to raise the state gasoline tax, one of the few mechanisms that could have generated dedicated funding, failed to reach a vote in the legislature. By 2018, a coalition of local business and civic leaders had formed the I-10 Bridge Task Force. Their conclusion was blunt. The traditional government funding model had proven over 20 years that it wasn't going to deliver this bridge. The only viable path was a public-private partnership, a private consortium that would build, finance, and operate the crossing, recovering its investment through tolls. Even that moved slowly. Federal coronavirus relief funds brought $30 million in 2020. The governor committed $85 million in state matching funds. In December 2022, Senator Bill Cassidy secured $150 million from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the third largest federal infrastructure grant awarded in the country that year. The P3 contract was signed in January 2024. Financial close came in August. Ground broke in April 2026. From the first formal federal proposal in 1999 to the start of construction, 27 years. From the $450 million estimate in 2002 to the $2.3 billion contract in 2024, a 411% cost increase. The escalation isn't complicated. Materials cost more, labor costs more, financing costs more. The bridge didn't get harder to build. The work that needed to be done in 2002 is the same work being done today. The $1.85 billion difference isn't a construction cost. It's the price of the decision not to act. The bridge didn't get more expensive to build. The delay did. Every decision in the new bridge is a direct response to something that failed in the old one. The engineers didn't have to guess what needed fixing. 3 decades of federal inspection records told them exactly. The contract went to Calcasieu Bridge Partners, a consortium of Plenary Americas, Acciona, and Sacyr. $2.3 billion covers design, construction, financing, and 50 years of maintenance. The largest transportation infrastructure investment in Louisiana history. About $1.2 billion comes from public sources. The remaining $1.1 billion is financed privately through bonds, recovered through tolls after the bridge opens. Louisiana keeps a 15% share of toll revenue once the private partner's costs are covered, money that can reduce rates or fund other infrastructure in the region. Crucially, the private partner carries the construction risk. If costs run over, Calcasieu Bridge Partners covers it. For a state whose last major bridge project came in 2 years late and 67% over budget, that matters. Now, what the money is actually building, the new bridge goes north of the existing one. That single decision makes everything else possible. Construction crews build the new structure while the old one stays open. I-10 never closes. Traffic keeps moving throughout the entire build. All 4 segments, foundations, approach roads, the river crossing, the Sampson Street interchange, are under construction simultaneously. Right now, there's a railroad crossing at Sampson Street where trains block the I-10 ramp every time one passes. The new project builds an overpass, separating the two permanently. Then there's the bridge itself. The existing deck is 52 feet wide, 4 lanes, each lane just over 13 feet, tight enough that 2 commercial trucks passing each other have almost no margin. The new bridge carries 6 full lanes plus dedicated entry and exit lanes on each side and 12-foot shoulders on both sides. The total road width more than doubles. Those shoulders fix one of the most dangerous features of the current bridge. Right now, there are none. A breakdown, a blowout, a crash, anything that stops a vehicle instantly blocks a lane with no way for emergency responders to reach it without halting all traffic. On the new bridge, a disabled vehicle has somewhere to go that isn't the middle of an active lane above the river. The biggest change is the grade. The existing bridge peaks at 152 feet and climbs at up to 5%, the steepest grade in Louisiana. That's why the speed limit is capped at 50 miles per hour. That's why trucks and cars arrive at the summit at different speeds. That's why loaded semis strain going up and run hot coming down. The new bridge reaches its high point between 75 and 95 feet, with the elevation distributed over a much longer, gentler arc. The river still gets its 135-foot clearance for shipping. The brutal grade disappears. The 50 miles per hour limit goes away. The right lane only truck restriction goes away. For the first time in its history, this crossing will operate at full interstate standards. The engineering questions are answered. The financing is locked. What's left is simpler and harder. Who pays and whether that's fair? In October 2023, Louisiana's Transportation Committee voted on the new bridge, number 8-6. 3 months later, they voted again, 11-2. Yes, the bridge didn't change. The problem didn't change. One number changed, the toll. Here's why tolls are such a fight. When you buy gas, you're already paying for the interstate. There's a federal fuel tax in every gallon, a state fuel tax on top of that. Trucking companies pay even more because their vehicles tear up roads faster. The whole system was designed so you'd never see a toll booth on an interstate. You already paid at the pump. So, when someone adds a toll to an interstate bridge, truckers call it a double tax. And honestly, they're not wrong. The original truck toll was $12.50 per crossing. The Trucking Association sent an urgent email blast to its members. Local mayors put out a joint statement. The proposal collapsed. After renegotiation, the truck rate dropped to $8.25 with a tag. Out-of-area drivers pay $2.50. And if you live in the 5 surrounding parishes, you pay a quarter, 25 cents. That local rate is doing a lot of political work. Under $200 a year for a daily commuter, basically invisible. It let local lawmakers vote yes without their constituents feeling it. The real bill falls on out-of-town freight. One trucking CEO did the math in front of the committee. At $8.25 per crossing, his company would pay $107,000 a year. Over 50 years, that's $16 million from one company. And he made the point plainly. That cost doesn't disappear. It gets passed to his clients, then to the stores, then to you. But here's the other side. The project costs $2.3 billion. Public money covers $1.2 billion. The other $1.1 billion has to come from somewhere. Senator Mark Abraham, whose constituents drive this bridge every day, said it as plainly as it can be said. It's a toll bridge or no bridge. The free option already exists. I-210, a few miles south, no toll, 8 to 10 extra miles every trip. For most drivers, $2.50 is the better deal. For a trucking company running 50 trucks a day across that river, the math is harder. The current bridge stays free until the new one opens in early 2030. Tolling starts in late 2031 and runs 50 years. Is it fair? Depends what you mean by fair. Truckers already paid for this road. That's real. But the road went 22 years without getting fixed because there was no money. That's also real. The bill for 2 decades of doing nothing always lands somewhere. This time, it lands at the toll booth. On April 29, 2026, Louisiana's governor stood on the lakefront in Lake Charles and broke ground on the new bridge, 27 years after anyone first suggested building it. But by the time of that ceremony, crews had already been working for months. Foundation prep, utility relocation, soil testing. The groundbreaking was the photo op. The work had already started. All 4 sections are being built at the same time. The river crossing, the approaches, the foundations, the Sampson Street interchange, simultaneously. Because when you've waited 27 years, you don't build things in sequence. The first big disruption comes in August 2028, when Sampson Street closes for about 18 months to build the overpass that finally ends the railroad blockage. Then, February 2030, that's the moment. Traffic shifts to the new bridge and the Pistol Bridge, the structure that opened in 1952 as a state highway crossing and spent 78 years carrying an interstate it was never designed for, crosses its last vehicle. Demolition starts the same day, section by section, over 21 months. The truss that has defined the Lake Charles skyline since the post-war era, the steep grade, the crossed-gun ironwork, gone by November 2031. Final acceptance, December 2031. 6 lanes, shoulders, full interstate speed, no restrictions, done. The project creates 16,000 jobs and $3.29 billion in regional economic impact. None of that accounts for what the old bridge was quietly costing every year it stayed up, in freight delays, in evacuation risk, in 2 decades of accumulated damage to a corridor that couldn't afford the disruption. The new bridge has its own uncertainties. Toll rates adjust with inflation. $8.25 today won't be $8.25 in 2051. If the private partner fails to maintain the structure, the bridge reverts to the state. These risks are real, but none of them include a structural score 1 point above mandatory closure. The Pistol Bridge was never supposed to be an interstate bridge. It was promised a replacement in the 1960s. It got one in 2031. The lesson isn't that infrastructure is expensive. It's that waiting is what makes it expensive. Every year you don't act, the bill gets bigger, the bridge gets worse, and 90,000 people keep crossing it because there's no other choice. For 30 years, that cost was carried in steel. Starting in 2031, it'll be carried in tolls.